Hello, everybody. Welcome to Effortless Testing with Applitools Autonomous. I'm Dave Piacente, DevRel here at Applitools, as well as the Director of Test Automation University. For today, for this first section, we're going to step through an application. It's always good to start with an example app. So our application under test is this e-commerce app, this demo app, where it actually has all of the core makings of an e-commerce store. So a bunch of products with pictures, prices. You go in, you can select different variants, you can set a quantity, you can add to cart. It adds to cart. There's a cart with all the, subtotal, all those things, checkout, remove from the cart, and the list goes on. So we'll go ahead and take this and use it for focusing on the first core feature that's really interesting with Autonomous, and that is our full website test. And so what you can do if you have no test is just come in, say, create a full website test, and it gives you this wizard. And in the wizard, you can go ahead and plug in the URL for a site you want to test. And then from there, you can choose to use just the default environments, or you can remove some. These are just the initial pre-canned offerings for a quick start. But there is a whole section on configuring environments in the app, so we can actually change this later. And then there's some additional options. And so the way that this website, full website test works is it actually checks a sitemap and then processes the sitemap, catalogs everything within it. And if there's nested sitemaps, it also creates a master catalog of that. And then from there, it will use each of the pages found in the sitemap, all the URLs, and create visual checkpoints for each of the pages that it finds. And so for simplicity, I'm going to go ahead and actually choose one of these optional settings to just set a cap. So instead of checking every page, we'll just check, we'll check 5 pages. And then by default, it's listing 3 different options. We'll just do 2 just to be safe. And we'll hit next just to make this a bit faster for us for the demo. And it's going to go ahead and create baselines as part of an initial run. And so it's going to do a couple things actually in addition to that. So as I mentioned, it's going to go and grab the sitemap and process all the pages, do the visual checks, as well as actually check the status codes of the pages. And it's going to let us know everything it finds once it's done with this initial run. And this is the first step of the website test. The complete cycle for a feedback loop in this setup is actually to do the baseline and then run the test and then capture the same information again. So we have a baseline and a checkpoint. So the initial image that we think is and agree is the source of truth. And then any future runs will be used as this checkpoint. This is what we found. Let's compare it to the baseline. And so as we see here, we have all the different pages that were found. And there's a gallery page for products, there's the actual product page, there's some additional pages, and there's one issue that was found, and there's a page that actually 404 is, it's the about page. So let's go ahead and hit run test, and it's going to complete the feedback cycle, capturing the checkpoint to compare against the baselines for all these different viewport sizes. And while that's running, I can minimize this and just speak briefly about the environment. So we have access to all different cross browsers for web. And we have Safari, Edge, Chrome, and some Android emulation. And if we wanted to, we can come in and actually configure additional environments. And then the part where this all kind of comes together is the plans. So we can actually schedule this to run however we want, daily, weekly, whenever. And it looks like it finished. So we'll go ahead and see details. It shows us the complete results. And then we can go ahead and say review results. So this will jump us into the results gallery. This will show us all the different things that it found and show us what was found to compare it against previous runs. And then from there, there's a couple callouts. So these 2 tests on here say page not found. We could actually go ahead and if we wanted to exclude these from the website test. And it did actually find some diffs. These are actually interesting. I'm curious. Oh, it actually might be a load error in the app. Let me check real quick. Yeah, it didn't actually display the nav, so that must just be a transient failure in the application. Oops. And then that's the URL to click if you want to actually go and see what the app was. And we can see that it actually does load correctly. So let's go back to the results gallery. And then this one I think is the same thing. Oh, it actually renders slightly differently. Yeah, again, because the nav. So these are both transient errors. So I'm not going to pay too much attention to those. So that's running with the crawler. And now let's just demonstrate something interesting. Let's say we actually wanted to, well, first approve these. Let me make sure that this is the one on the right. The checkpoint is actually the desired state that we want. And so we'll go ahead and accept that. And then same for the other one. So then that gives us the correct state. Now, let's go ahead and let's simulate in our test as if something in the application actually changed that was pushed by development. Let's say a new element was added to the page. So we'll go ahead and we'll do that by simulating it by editing the test. There's actually a way to come in to the advanced settings and use this small JavaScript escape hash that we'll use to modify the page. So it will actually add an element to the page that wasn't there before. So we'll go ahead and make that change, and then we'll go ahead and rerun the tests. And then we hop into the results. We can see it's running. Okay, 10 screens. And I'm just waiting for it to finish. So yes, so let's check the total count here. It's saying, oh, there's still a couple running. There's a bunch that are unresolved. So if we can come in here, we can look, and we'll look at the diffs. So inside of the actual test view, and apologies, I went fast previously. Inside the test view for each individual test, this is the test viewer. And in here, there are a lot of different pieces of functionality that are important. I won't go through all of them, but if you're familiar with eyes, our visual testing product, there's some similarities here. So it's going to show you the checkpoint image, and then it's going to show you the baseline image, and then it's going to show you the differences found between them. And so you can hide diffs and show diffs, and they're highlighted in this colored tile. I don't know which color because I'm colorblind. Apologies. And then there's actually next to the call out for what each functionality is, sometimes there's a key, and this is a keyboard shortcut. So to hide and show diffs, you can quickly hit D. And then down in the bottom right, there's the ability to expand the image and zoom in and out. And so you can actually zoom in so we can get closer to seeing what the diff is more clearly. And so what I want to do is actually approve this because this is an accepted change. And then what that's going to do is trigger this auto maintenance. You'll see this little window pop up in the bottom right. And so it's going to do a couple things that are interesting. So it's first going to approve this one image, and then it's going to look through all of the other images and all the other test results and see, regardless of the screen size and the platform that it was on, if these are actually, if it's the same issue. So you don't have to go to every single screen and hit accept. You hit accept once, and theoretically it would apply it to all of them. And so now if we go in here, we can see that all those tests, they would have been previously marked as unresolved here in the status bar, and now they're actually marked as passed. And the only reason that this whole test run is marked as failed is because of those pages that weren't found previously. So if we come in here, you can actually filter from the gallery view. At the top, there's a status here, and you can say failed, and we can see that it's actually because page not found. Maybe this is okay that this page isn't found, so you can say, I want to exclude this from the URL list so it doesn't actually show up as a failure. And then in the future run, then all of this, assuming all these screens passed, it would ignore the failures for the missed pages, and then the status would actually be marked as passed. So that's the website crawler. Now, I'm sure there's questions around, well, what if I actually have a site that doesn't have a sitemap, or what about single page applications? And we can get to that in the Q&A a bit later. So for now, I want to step into maybe a more practical example of using this, using Autonomous to test a different, more common use case, which is a functional test, as opposed to just doing a visual check against a flat URL or a flat page. So we can do that with our we call our custom flow using what we call NLP, natural language processing, where we can specify using plain English the behavior that we want to actually exercise in the browser on the application under test. So there's one or two ways to get there. We can actually go and create a new test through the app, or we can come from the result gallery here. We can go ahead and just we can just come in on this hamburger menu on any of these tests, and we want to say add new test from here. And what that does is it actually pre-populates the initial fields around the start URL. And so I picked this one test in particular because I knew that this was the e-commerce page. So this is the actual URL I want to start with, because I want to take the most common example for this app, which is adding to cart. And so we want to go to the e-commerce page, and this in Autonomous, there's this kind of organizational concept of an application. And so this is the e-commerce app. So that's the name of the application. And then when we initially ran the wizard, it created this schedule, this plan of when it were to run. And so this gives us everything we need to get started. You don't really have to know too much. And the fun part is actually just getting into this part here where you can type out commands in plain English. So conceptually, we'll just type out the commands for what I showed you at the very beginning when I said this is simple, add to cart. So it would be, we say click on, and we'll just type out a product name. So one of them is small succulent planter pot. And then we want to choose a type of the product. So remember, there's a variant dropdown. So we can say choose coral from the variants dropdown menu. And then when you actually have something that it doesn't accept, then it would actually give you these red squiggles. I'm just trying to see, what did I actually screw up here? Choose. Let's try it. Choose coral. Is choose no longer a valid word? The variants drop down menu. And then if you ever get stuck on a command, then you can always come into, there's this pop-up, and then it can actually give you a learn more, which would take you to documentation. And then it actually shows you the constructs of what is acceptable and what's not. And I think select, if not choose, would be another valid option here for the dropdown. So let's say select coral from the variants drop-down menu, and then clear the quantity field, and then type 3 in the quantity field, click add to cart, wait for added to cart to appear, click the cart link to go to the cart, and then we want to add UI visual validation. Let me just say, this is saying, under the process, try rephrasing it. Select coral from the, select coral. Select coral. It's interesting. Select coral. Okay, choose coral from the variants. Just say, as soon as you say that. All right, let's try it without the parameter of drop-down menu. Usage from variants. Let's try that. Okay, so once we have the commands, we can go ahead and click preview test here at the top right. And then it's going to pop open a preview panel as it's running. And here, so you can actually do a live view, make it bigger, and see what it's doing. So it went here, it shows coral. Let's see, where is it? It's clearing the quantity field. It's thinking about clearing the quantity field. Oh, step failed. Apparently it didn't like that one. Must have timed out. Oh, element not found. Clear the quantity field. I don't believe anything changed on that. Very interesting. Well, we can skip this step and rerun it. We don't need to clear it. We can just input values into the quantity field, unless it can't find the quantity field. There it goes. Okay, and now added, and we did a visual check on the checkout. Great. Now, that gives us a test, a single test against a single product on our app. Now, if we wanted to add this to our suite of tests, we would just give it a name. We'd say add to cart, and then we would create it. Now, let's say we wanted to test additional products. Well, it would be cumbersome to then go through and then do the same thing over and over and repeat ourselves. So what we actually have is the ability to data drive our tests in Autonomous. And so let's go ahead and add different parameters to, and then step through actually what it takes to do an initial data driving of a test. So we could say click on product name instead of the actual product. We could say with curly brackets, do product name. We can specify whatever variable name we want. I'm just going to say product name. And then we would say choose product color from variants. And then we would want to then say type the product quantity in the quantity field. And then from there, you can see the parameter values that they exist now here. And if you wanted to actually input values here to test in the preview mode, you could, but that's not what we're going to do. Instead, we're going to actually upload a data set that we can use. And so to do that, you can come into test data, and you can see that these were the parameters we had. And there's this tab here called data sets, and you can add a data set. And to start, it actually can give you a data set template file that we can use. And so I've already downloaded that. And here's an example. I loaded it into Google Sheets for easier viewing. And so I've got some product names here. I've got some product colors, and I've got different quantities I want to check. And so I already have that downloaded as a CSV file. And so I'm just going to say the name for this is add to cart. The application is the application that was predefined when I ran the initial website flow. And then I'm going to upload this from my downloads and then hit open, add data set. And then to actually attach the data set correctly, we'd come into the plan here. And the actual plan configuration for the tests that are running. So we have the add to cart, which I just added, and the full website that we initially had, and then the devices we initially chose in that wizard, the last time it was ran, and when it will actually run going forward. So down here, it actually has a little warning icon. It says there's no parameter values defined. So there's an icon here to add a data set. So we can come in here, select the one we just added, and add it. And then we can go ahead and update and run the plan. And what that should do is actually run using the data that was in this spreadsheet here that I just showed you. And we'll let that run. And as it's running, the thing I want to call out here is that each of the different flows will have their own images, their own baselines and checkpoints going forward, and be treated as their own unique tests. And so, for instance, this one is the practical leather watch, and then we have the intelligent wooden pants. And so we now have taken an initial test and been able to spread it out horizontally to give you more coverage based on the data-driven inputs that we have just uploaded. So those are the two really high-level, interesting flows that I think are really powerful for Autonomous. And then there's two additional things I want to cover. And one is an example of how I've used Autonomous recently that I think is interesting. And so I am, as I mentioned in the intro, I am the director for Test Automation University, which is this free online learning platform for test automation practitioners. And there's something that actually breaks once in a while on this site. And it took a while for me to understand exactly what's happening recently. But along with Test Automation U, we have this online Slack community, which has tens of thousands of people, and we have hundreds of signups a day. Now, there's this link here for TAU Slack. You click it, it opens a new page, and then it takes you here. And then from here, you should be able to sign up. Now, despite best interests and best effort, we've always tried to make this link never expire. And every time I check it, says doesn't expire. And then once in a while, randomly, without cause, it seems that the link expires. And then people don't get this page. They get a page that makes it so that they can't sign up. And so I eventually realized that there's an arbitrary limit in the Slack links that we are able to create, which is only after 400 uses, the link becomes dead. And so rather than just having someone in the community message somebody on my team who then messages me saying, hey, this is broken, I'd rather be notified right away when it's broken. And so I've been using Autonomous to actually monitor this exact use case, which is the perfect thing for it. One of many use cases for Autonomous is actually doing site monitoring very easily. Now, there's one or two ways to do this. So I could create a custom flow test that goes to this page, clicks this link, and then opens the new tab, then checks the tab. But I also manage the front end and the back end for the site. And I know that this link is actually a redirect. So it's actually, and so it's testautomationu applitools.com/slack.html. And if the Slack reg link ever changes, this will always point to the latest one. So I know that this is actually a safe URL to test. So we can just test this URL directly. And so, so I've been doing that, and I can show you really quickly what I've been doing. And so just for simplicity, I come in and I don't do anything except just a really simple custom flow. I could say the test name, something like check TAU Slack reg works. And then we can add a new application since it's not part of the e-commerce app. So we can just say TAU, and then we can create a new plan and say, I would say, I just want to do a daily monitor every day at, I don't know, 7 a.m. my time zone. And I actually don't care about running on every single environment. I just care that it runs on one single browser. That should be fine. And then I just go here, and then I add a UI validation, and then I go ahead and I can preview this. And then in this, there's actually a small, interesting, mildly nefarious problem, and that is that on this reg page, this content is dynamic right in here. And so we actually can account for that. But if we just use the defaults and you run this test, it will eventually fail and just be marked as unresolved because there will always be a difference found on this page. I want to know if there's something wildly different, because the difference between this page and the page where you can't register is actually fundamentally a different layout completely. And so inside of Autonomous, we can handle that by coming into the options here. When you click in the visually check the screen, you can set a different match level. And so by default, strict is what's used, which is like a very rigid comparison between the checkpoints and the baselines. And instead we can use layout, which it just says detect differences in the page structure. And so then we could go ahead and create this test, and I can use it, and that would run daily. Now, the part where you can complete the feedback loop here is actually in how you receive notifications. And so inside of the team configuration, so this team is blank slate v3, you can actually come into the settings, and you can make sure that things are turned on for the email notifications appropriately. So if the test, once you get the test to a passed state, you just only want to be notified when there's a problem. And so you would say, make sure this one's toggled, test status has changed from passed to failed or unresolved, and then you should get an email notification when there's a problem. And then just really quickly, also, I'll briefly mention that there are some integrations that we have. There's more coming very soon. But for your typical ticket tracker, like a Jira or into a Rally, you can actually take an issues found, go ahead and tag those and pump those into your ticket tracking solutions. And but regardless, for my monitoring use case, this is how I've been using it, and it's been super helpful. And there's one more thing I want to cover, and that is, what if you're actually testing something that's not production? That's a common request we get, and it's a common use case that makes a ton of sense. And so for that, we actually have the ability to configure a tunnel to connect from Autonomous to your local machine. And so inside of the account settings, you can come here and configure a tunnel and just give it a name. I'll just give it Dave Local. And then you can configure the host names that you want to allow. So it's implicit deny all, and then you have to allow the specific ones that you want. And so for me, I'm just going to do localhost. And then from here, you have to select your operating system to get the actual tunneling agent that you need. And I've already, and then from there, it actually gives you the command. So I'll just grab this command. I've already downloaded the agent, just so we didn't have to sit here and wait to watch me download it. And so let me hop into the terminal. And so this is the command that was given to me, and I'll run it. But there's going to, at least for Mac OS, and I'm assuming also for Linux, not sure for Windows, the binary you get initially actually doesn't come with the execute permission. So you just run chmod +x in the terminal, and it can give you what you need. There's also one more step. Once you run it, it's going to probably be flagged by security in Mac OS. So you can just open the security and privacy settings, and then scroll down and where it says the tunnel client macOS was blocked, hit allow anyway, and then step through the prompt for password, and then you should be able to run it. It's going to prompt you, and now you can say, yes, I do want to open it. And now the tunnel will run. You'll know it's running because it'll give some additional readout. And after that happens, you should be able to come back. And if you refresh the account page, once it actually has finished the handshake, it should say connected. And it might take a second before it actually shows. Well, so while I wait for that to catch up, let me go ahead and, here we go, is available. So it is running now. That's how we know that it actually is completed. So now we can come here and, still not going. Let me go ahead while we're waiting and just let me spin up a local web server real quick that's going to share a file. So I have a really basic file, just an index.html file. And I'm going to serve it from localhost, port 3000, and it's just this page. So let's come back, make sure that the tunnel is connected. Still says disconnected. Interesting. Let me go ahead and write the test real quick. So let's write a test, and we'll do a custom flow to localhost, and we can just start doing a simple check. So we'll just say add the UI visual validation after we go here. And let me just see if maybe the status page didn't update, but the connection is actually active. Sometimes there's hiccups and gremlins in the internet. But at this point, let me just go ahead and stop sharing. And let's switch over to questions. Let me pull up the Q&A tab. Okay. Let's see. Charles. When we tried eyes 2 years ago, it was very sensitive, finding failures where there were none. Has it been enhanced since? Talking about visual differences with eyes, yes. It has been from 2 years ago to now. There's been a lot of advancements made inside of in a lot of things. The AI algorithms, the way that we do renders inside of our ultrafast grid, the ways that we capture all of the resources and assets from the SDKs and send them up to our infrastructure to do the renders. The biggest tax you pay with visual testing with eyes is usually around managing the baselines and making sure that the feedback that you get is valuable. And so a lot of the tools we've added and enhancements we made are also around how to make that simpler. So like the auto maintenance I just showed in Autonomous, we have something similar in eyes. We call it the smart batching. It basically can identify like groups of differences across all the different environments. So you can actually say, yeah, that's just the same thing. I can just click approve. It's the same idea, just shown differently in eyes. So there's have been a lot of improvements made in that regard. I'd be curious if you had any specific examples you could share, but we can say that is something we constantly try to improve upon. Could Autonomous provide a report off the sitemap to tell us how many are available before we select how many to limit to? Well, Dwayne, that's an interesting idea to separate do a pre-processing. I think anything's possible. That's good feedback for us to share with the product team and see if there's plans for something like that. I also know that there's plans for us to add additional amenities and enhancements to what we check, not just for the status codes, but also page performance, and potentially hooking up something even like a lighthouse or something to actually check all kinds of things in a single snapshot of when you run. But in terms of if you want to actually limit it, that's interesting. It would be nice to know. There's also by default, there are some preset limits in the sitemap checker. So for each, we call it folder inside of the concept of the sitemap processing. So for every like subdomain or subpage that you have. So like if it's e-commerce, like / e-commerce is one example. If there was additional pages like / bank app or whatever, there would be, we actually cap it to 50 pages per subfolder. By default, we process everything. We know what everything is, but we don't actually check those pages unless you go through and you actually want to approve them. So we actually also do some pre-filtering. So that way you don't have like a runaway reaction and end up with a situation where you have like, if you have 15,000 pages that you end up just automatically checking 15,000 pages, like there's actually some pre-filtering that we do. And then you can go through and be more strategic about what you actually want to select. All right. Jim says, how can I handle quirky issues like loading speed causing transient errors like you're seeing? Oh, great point. Transient error, there is a solution to resolving the transient failures. That gets into the advanced settings in Autonomous, and that's also something that comes fully baked in if you're using eyes or in the SDKs today. You might be familiar with it. For something like quirky issues around loading, let me share my screen again real quick. I can show that. So inside of a test, what's the best way to do this? So yeah, we could do it inside of any test. So if we wanted to do it for the full website test, we can come into edit, we can go to the advanced, and then inside this advanced screen, there's a bunch of different options. And so the first one here is lazy loading support. So this is basically going to scroll through the page once you turn it on, and there's some basic defaults. So it's only going to scroll by default up to 15,000 pixels, and it's going to scroll 300 pixels at a time, and it's going to wait 2 seconds in between each scroll. And so this is what we found to be a reasonable heuristic to get through scrolling a whole page and making sure that things have fully loaded. And that typically would resolve this issues like we saw with I mean, it's not exactly the same because lazy loading typically imply like things below the fold that haven't loaded yet. But if we're creating a scroll action with a delay, theoretically, that would also account for the issue that we saw with the nav not fully loading. Okay, so that's good. What if you have 2 same labeled elements, e.g. save? How do you describe the one you mean to click? So there is positional, the concept of position is something that you can also use inside of Autonomous, and in the document that I linked to, like once you're in the app, you can click to learn more. It also covers this, but you can specify click the save at the top right of the page, or click the save to the left of the, the image, or you could basically be as, try and be as descriptive as you want. And then if all else fails, which I don't think it will, but there's the ability to also kind of break the implicit strategy of trying to not have the description text used have anything to do with the implementation. You actually could specify locators and things like that if you really needed to. But with the positional stuff, you should be able to get around a lot of those issues. So if you have 2 or more of the same thing, you can just specify one that's in a different place. Will notifications be sent to Slack eventually through an integration? Yes, we already have integrations through for eyes for all of these things, and it's just a matter of time to bring those over and port those over for Autonomous as well. What if you have a CSV of hundreds of rows of data that you want to compare against a UI table and want to ignore the sorting of the rows? Interesting. Yeah. So more complex assertions this is actually a question we get a lot. Like the way that people typically solve for testing complex data sets on a page is to do a complicated assertion where you already have a predefined collection. And then you do some sort of comparison between what you have, which is the expected value, and what's on the page, or if you care about sort, which you say you don't. Now, the CSV, so like this concept is interesting. I think that the way that we would typically recommend to approach something like this is like it's different. So the test data stuff I showed, not relevant here. The visual testing stuff is where typically what we see a lot of our customers do is test complex data sets and charts and things in Canvas elements, a lot of these kinds of very visual components. And then for data, they're able to verify it because we could just do a strict comparison and then it should look the same, from screen to screen, unless you get into obviously different viewport sizes. But for it doesn't solve the initial problem where you have the data that you want and you want to assert that data matches what's on the screen. But in the strategy I'm describing, it's actually it's something a bit different. So you have to check it once to make sure that yes, this screen has the data that I expect. And then from there, moving forward, you can just run visual checks and you don't actually have to do this compute or import this fixture or any of that. So it's a little bit more work on the upfront to get a source of truth that you say, yes, this is the baseline and this is correct. But it doesn't solve for exactly the functional flow that you're describing that you're used to. From site monitoring testing, can we extract the text from the highlighted differences found? Not currently the ability to. I'm just interested in the monitor testing. You're trying to say, I think, site monitor found a difference. Here are the differences, which would be super cool. But short of that, we don't have that, but we show you the picture. So maybe a good compromise would be in the alert to you of what the difference was. We actually just include it in the email, and that way you don't have to click into the URL. Maybe that's an interesting way to do it. But no, we don't currently have that. Does screen resolution or scale factor affect the test cases? If the tests are automated on HD resolution and then need the test to execute in 4K, will affect the results. We try, yeah, we do compensate for a lot of those. It's like, I forgot the word I was going to say. But it's like, we account for, it's like retina displays versus something else. Like, I mean, some of it is also, well, I guess I'm trying to think. If you're trying to say you're running the test on a local environment where it captures an image, and then you're trying to run it on a different environment, we do actually strive really hard to compensate for a lot of these things. Now, if you end up finding that you do catch differences, first of all, it's actually kind of an interesting use case that I'm trying to think if I've run across it before. So you're saying you capture on an HD resolution and then you need to execute it on 4K. Will it affect the tests? Scaling we account for. And then I feel like we account for a lot of the other details that would show up. So I don't typically think that would be a problem, but never say never with software. And in the case, if you do end up with something that shows like a wildly different environment, like you can take and it would just create separate baselines if it really was fundamentally different, and then you would just have treated as a different environment. There's different ways to slice it and to answer your question, which is why I'm having trouble giving you a concise answer. But there's one school of thought where people want to take one image, one baseline, and use it across environments, because then it's like this should just all kind of be roughly the same, and the layout should look the same. And in those cases, we typically do, account for that, but that's an uncommon case that people have. Typically, it's they have different images for different environments, and that's kind of intended. But for a lot of the differences between screens, typically people just run on consistent environments, and then they don't typically run into these issues. But if you do, then there's a way to actually reorganize your tests to support it. To clarify, the script comparison assumes the UI sorts it the way you want. Yeah, if the script comparison assumes the UI sorts. So going back to the initial question from Charles around the CSV of hundreds of rows of data, this was to say we assume that the UI sorts it the way we want. So we give it the benefit of the doubt. I think the same fundamental approach that I just described is one way to do it. And maybe there's like a compromise where it's like you actually have an initial script that you maintain with the CSV to assert that the data is there correctly. And then going forward, we just use visual assertions to check going forward that everything appears correctly. So then you don't have to update and maintain a cumbersome script. And ideally, just once the test is running and in flow, it's not something you have to revisit so often. Okay, we have time for a couple more questions. Let's see. Let me sort by unanswered. Okay. If the unexpected pop-ups comes during the execution, then will it affect the visual comparison? It can. And if it does, there's the ability within a test or within a flow to specify like a precondition. I mean, this assumes that it's coming. So like, for instance, like if you needed to log into every page, or there is like a cookies pop-up, or there's something like that, you can have a flow that goes through and actually executes prior to taking a visual screenshot. So you can create custom flows as if they're like reusable functions that you can plug into other tests. Any test can run any other test, or a flow like the website crawler can run other tests. So great. So I think Applitools Autonomous is pretty special. It's something that actually does things a bit differently than what we've done in the past. I think it challenges the status quo for how to approach things going forward. And I think that what we have now is just the beginning of something really interesting. And so I think it's pretty cool. I can tell you like the jargon that's on my script that I could say, but I think it's it's going to be, if it's not already, the coolest thing since sliced bread. So if you're ready to see it in action, or you're ready to experience what we call the intelligent testing platform, which is what Autonomous is built on top of, then please sign up for a free trial today. For us, again, thanks for joining, and we look forward to seeing you again soon.